It's a frightening story, but I'll tell you the story. Story goes like this. One day a man came to this Rebbe. I think it was Nachum of Chernobyl, I think. He was crying. He said, Rebbe, my wife is in labor already for 4 days. The child just won't come out and they don't know what to do. They're afraid to operate. They say that maybe both of them will die, but they're afraid to leave her in the situation. They say that maybe she'll die. What should I do? And the Rebbe put his head down for a long time, like about 15 minutes, put it down, head on the table. The man didn't know what to do. He thought maybe the Rebbe went to sleep. He had no idea. On the other hand, they didn't want to interrupt him. And so he sort of made like, little noises. After 15 minutes, the Rebbe lifted his head and it said, you have a boy. It'll be all right. And sure enough, he went back to the man ran back to the hospital, and sure enough, his wife gave birth to a boy. And they brought the boy up, but the tragedy struck. The husband passed away, and his wife passed away shortly thereafter. So the boy was an orphan. Now, this is where I started the story. So the boy was an orphan. And they passed him from family to family, place to place. People didn't have money. It was just very difficult to hold. And he was a little bit sort of it wasn't too smart of a kid, and he made noise, and they didn't listen too well. So it was very difficult to hold him in families. So, the Jews, they gave him what to eat or whatever, but so finally the Bachrim in the yeshiva, they noticed that he was, the boys in the yeshiva, they noticed this fellow was wandering around. So they took him into the yeshiva and they fed him and everything, but he wasn't relevant to sitting and learning and praying and those things. He would put on tefillin every day, but he didn't have much of a head. But he was friendly. He was friendly with the boys. They would give him a place to sleep and they would give him food. Well, eventually he got inducted into the army, the Ukrainian army, whatever is the Russian army. They saw him wandering around. And the boys would go and, it was some sort of an outpost far away, and they would write to him. They would write to him, and he would have somebody write back, or maybe he himself would write back a little. He couldn't write very well. And so it was, once a week they would write him until once a month they would write him. And then they wrote him, and they didn't receive any letters back. They didn't receive any letters back. And so maybe it was Ukraine, maybe it was the Russian army. I guess the Russian army. So they didn't receive any letters back. This went on for a long time until finally the boys wondered what happened. And they went and they asked around. And it took a lot of asking until finally they discovered that this young man, that when they found out that he was Jewish, so they tried to force him to change his religion. That was a big movement by the Tsar at the time. That they took people into the boys into the army. They called them cantonists, and they forced them to eat not kosher food and to pray, to the churches and to eat. So a lot of the young Jewish boys they succumbed to this. They couldn't hold out. And some of them, right? Some of them they were stubborn, and so it says this young boy that they tried to make him eat not kosher food, and they tried to make him, whatever it is, bow down to the cross, whatever it was, and he refused. And they wanted him to work on Shabbos, and he refused to do it. Anyway, so they beat him, and still he refused, and they beat him, and they beat him, and they beat him, and he refused. He refused to do. And they beat him for days, for weeks, for months. They beat him, and he still refused to, to bow down to their things and this. And eventually he died. He died. And they went and they told the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said that I saw that this was going to happen. I knew that this was going to happen. That's why it was so hard for his mother to give birth. His soul didn't want to come into the world. His soul knew that he would suffer and that he would suffer these tortures for Judaism. He knew, and so it didn't want to come into the world. So I prayed. That's why I put my head down. I prayed to give him power and courage, that he would be able to stand up with Kiddush Hashem. That's what we just learned about. that he would be able to stand the tortures and the punishments, and he wouldn't leave Hashem. And that's why I prayed so long. That's why the soul came down, and he succeeded in his task. He died Kiddush Hashem. Scary story, but a true story. How the essence of a Jew is Mekadshe Shemecha. Jews have been doing it all along. And when there's the raising of the dead, those Jews that died with Kiddush Hashem, they'll be on a whole total different level. They'll be the happiest. They'll see the amazing results that were brought by their tremendous sacrifice. Okay, 3 o'clock.